Yo, what's checking, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Orange Bloods Modcast. I'm Geoff Ketchum, joined by the usual crew: Anwar, Richardson, Jason Suchomel, Alex Dunlap. Fellas, the Texas Longhorns are sitting at 19 commitments. It feels like more than anything else where we should probably start off as people are starting to enter the chat. I'll remind everybody, hey, do us a solid, like the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, get notifications, do all that stuff. Alex, I'll come to you first because Anwar and I did a long show yesterday that we did the Drunk Uncle show last night, which just happened to coincide with Malik Muhammad's decision to commit to Texas. Longhorns sitting at 19. As we jump into a conversation about where the Longhorns are in recruiting, what awaits, your initial impression off the back end of yesterday's news.
Well, big news for sure. I think anybody that's watched Malik Muhammad can just – I mean, the guy can play. It's – one thing I'll say, Catch, and I'm going to have a column on this later about Malik Muhammad. I was working on it this morning, and I wasn't able to finish before the Modcast. But for me, one of the things about my understanding of football is that, I grew up, playing football and playing along the offensive and defensive lines, and those were the coaches in my family. They coached those positions, maybe linebackers and stuff. There was never a time growing up where I cared much about what was going on back here with these guys running around in the secondary. It's a little bit harder for me to evaluate those kinds of players as opposed to sort of looking at the traits. What I wanted to do, and just kind of giving a little preview to my column, is just sort of look at these guys who are top 10 in the state of Texas, top 10-ish, top 10 adjacent, that have come out as corners and sort of over the last 10 years, what that means, what kind of player that turns out to be. And it's been an interesting look so far. I've only gotten back to 2014 so far and researched what's happened with all these guys. I mean, clearly there's some misses. But, man, if you're a cornerback that's rated as a top 10 player by Rivals or a top 10 adjacent player, I think that Malik Muhammad is ranked number 11 in the state right now. So I looked at guys that were ranked all the way out to, if you were the first cornerback in the class that was ranked and you were like number 14 or something like that, I consider that a similar type of profile. So just kind of looking back at those players, boy, there've been some hits, man. There've been some hits for sure. This is the kind of player that you bring into the program. Certainly some historical background. I think it'll continue to show that. But man, if you just look at Muhammad just on his own, just the change of direction, the instincts, the speed, he can hit. I think he can play nickel corner. I mean, he lined up in a couple different spots as I was watching his huddle reel. So not even watching full games. So I think he brings some versatility. He brings some athletic playmaking ability, and certainly a dude. I mean, he's going to be a take for anybody.
Anwar, your reaction to Alex's thoughts?
I mean, it's good stuff. I mean, Alex obviously does his breakdowns. I feel bad for any of Alex's teammates who he didn't care about, anyone in the secondary. Those poor guys thought Alex was his friend, and just realizing that Alex never cared about them at all. So, but I concur. I mean, I think we've all watched the film and concur that it's this guy is legit. He's legit. He's bona fide, certified, all the things that you would want to say. We talked about how good of a get this is for Texas, and really that secondary and doing and of course we know the importance of today's spread offenses. You better have some guys who can do something back there, and he looks like a guy that can really help them. And really, as Texas, tries to win now, but also starts trying to build for the SEC as well. You look at Malik Muhammad and you look at him as a kind of a key, important building block for not only the present, but then also the future.
Yeah, I said it last night, Jason. This is going back a little bit. I compared him to Cedric Griffin, not quite as tall, but same type of versatility. I love his ability to, if he were a wide receiver, we'd be talking about his catch radius and his ability to go up and get the football. I think if this guy was a wide receiver prospect and only focused on playing the wide receiver position, we'd still be talking about a guy that Texas would be recruiting. I think he'd be an elite wide receiver prospect. I think this guy's just a phenomenal football player. And you and I get in, even this week, have argued a little bit, not argued, we've just debated the virtue of production on the field versus upside as a player. This is a guy that is pound for pound as good of a football player as any in the state. It's one of the reasons why I would vote that he'd be a guy that could come in and play early. This guy just can play football.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are really stealing all my thoughts, but great football player. He produces, like Alex said, I think he brings position versatility in the defensive backfield. You watch his film, and he's probably going to make his money at cornerback, so to speak, but he can play safety. Like Alex said, he can play nickel and cover out of the slot. He's athletic. He's long. We've got him at 6 foot 170, and he almost looks bigger than 6 foot, like even on tape and in person when I've seen him. Like I almost would guess him to be a little over 6 foot. So, you know, when you got a corner that's 6 foot and above that can run and turn his hips and cover, and like Alex said, man, he's physical too. He's maybe, you know, I keep using the term wiry a little bit, but he will come up and pop you. And he's really physical at the line of scrimmage and does a good job even in the run game when those receivers are trying to block him, man. He'll shed those blocks and come up and deliver a pop. So there's not really, it's hard to find any holes in his game. So, like you said, big pickup, and I'd be surprised, Ketch, if he didn't contribute early for Texas somewhere in the defensive backfield, because he's a guy that you can plug in, and really if you have a hole anywhere in the defensive backfield, he can help you out.
Jason, I'm just going to stay with you because it happened last night. We're in the middle of what was kind of the Malik Muhammad drunk uncle show. We started talking about the offensive lineman from Florida, Kirkland, who in the last 24 hours has turned into a buzzword of sorts.
Literally, Ketch, for Chris Nelson and everybody else watching, I was getting Peyton Kirkland information like 30 seconds before we went live. So, I mean, this is such a weird story that just has a bunch of moving parts, but we can break it down. I don't really know where to even begin with.
It's kind of perfect that he's from Florida. This does kind of remind me of the Florida guys that
no offense,
Charlie Strong first recruited. Just a little bit like outside the box from the normal recruiting stories that we've covered. We talked about this last night on the Drunk Uncle, and I would implore everybody, if you didn't see last night's show, or even if you did, go back, watch it again. I thought it was a really good deal. Where do we start this morning with Kirkland?
All right. Well, yeah, good question. So officially, I had to pull it up. Officially, he has a top 5 of Oklahoma, Michigan State, Florida, Miami, and Alabama. He's committing Saturday, I believe it's 6:30 Central Time, 7:30 Eastern Time. Where do we begin? I mean, Texas has made a strong charge there, and that kind of leaked out yesterday afternoon and last night, and I put a future cast in, and other people have predictions out there for him, and he is adamantly and publicly denying all this Texas talk. And in fact, a little spoiler, Rivals will have a video coming out with him today, and he's denying that Texas is a player in this at all, much less that he's going to commit to Texas. So Texas isn't in his top 5. They weren't in his top 2. We talked about this last night, like 10, 11 days ago. We had a top 2 that didn't include Texas. All the buzz was Michigan State this week until suddenly yesterday, you start hearing a lot of this Texas stuff kind of bubbling up below the surface. Someone asked me on Orange Bloods a few minutes before we started recording, like, Suchomel, did someone hack your account? Are you seriously sticking by this story that Texas is in a good spot for this offensive lineman who is adamantly denying that he's going to Texas? And my simple answer to that, Catch, is yes, I'm sticking by my recording that he's going to Texas. It's a weird deal. We'll go into more detail at a more appropriate time. But I bottom line is I continue to feel very good about Texas's chances of landing Peyton Kirkland, be the 5th offensive line commitment for Kyle Flood in Texas in this class. And this thing's so weird, dude. Things could change between now and Saturday, but as it stands, at 11:15 Thursday morning, I feel very good about Texas's chances as of right now. Don't quote me. Don't play this back tomorrow if something changes and say I was wrong. But as it stands,
Jason, how do you feel about Texas's chances of him actually visiting the campus?
Well, yeah, exactly. Assuming he commits to Texas, you got to figure he will take his official visit. Hell, he may even show up next weekend for their pool party. I don't know. I haven't talked to Peyton. Well, in fact, I did DM Peyton. I think this is okay to say. I DM'd him yesterday on Twitter. We follow each other. I said, hey, Peyton. I said, I do this with pretty much every kid that I think is going to commit. I said, hey, would you be willing to go on the record or give me some commitment quotes if it's going to be Texas? I said, I will absolutely 100% swear I will not say anything. I won't say you and I even talked until you make your announcement, blah, 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 blah. And I got a one-word response. No. So, he's not a kid that's going to give you a whole lot, Anwar, right now, but he hasn't visited Texas yet. He said that yesterday on Twitter. He goes, why would I commit somewhere I've never even been to? But, I still think he commits to Texas on Saturday. Maybe he visits for that pool party. Don't have an answer for that yet. Probably will after Saturday. I should be able to get that answer. And then obviously he still has an official visit that he can take in the fall.
Jace, Alex, one of the things that's interesting about this is I feel like we are now with Texas sitting at 19 commitments. There's no 25-man number they have to worry about, but there's still a lot of important prospects on the board. We are, to me, officially in the should Texas be taking this guy at this point in the recruiting class. And I think one of the interesting things about Kirkland is that I haven't heard anybody yet come out and say, I've watched that guy and he's a guy you absolutely have to have in this recruiting class. It's a fascinating potential take for the Longhorns. Yeah.
I'm not thrilled with the guy's tape. I'm not thrilled with the way he looks. I'm not. There could be something that Coach Flood sees. There clearly something he sees in these guys that I don't see. I don't see it in the.
Well, he's huge.
I don't see it in Kojo. I look at Andre Kojo. I don't see it. I don't think that guy's a take. I'm not sure that this guy Peyton Strickland's a take. I'm not sure how many of those offers are committable that he has. So I don't know. To me, it's like, there's some other guys, there's some other big fish still hanging out there that Texas still feels like. If they get this dude, that would be what, 6? How many? Five. Okay, yeah. So then could they even go to 6? If they wanted to
could, if the right, you're not going to turn down a TJ Shanahan or someone like that, but it'd have to be a pretty special player, I think, to go to 6.
Kyle Flood is going to do what Kyle Flood does. He has his guys that he likes. He has these big guys. Maybe he sees something in them that he can fix and, mold in the image of what he likes. We've seen him do it with monster human beings like Deontay Brown, right? He turned that, that guy looked like a cartoon of a football player, a cartoon of an offensive lineman at almost 400 pounds. He turned him into a draftable asset. So we'll see what happens there. And, it's just, look, I think that I would not want, probably personally, I would say if this evaluation takes me off of the ability to get some of these, it feels opposite of what happened last year. What Steve Sarkisian stood by last year, all the way into November, saying like, "Look, we could take all these guys that we wanted to right now. We're not going to do that. We're going to wait for our guys, our big ticket items. We're going to wait on the Kelvin Bankses and the DJ Campbells and the Cam Williams and like the rest of these guys. It feels like a different tact this year because there are guys like TJ Shanahan who has Texas in his top 5.
Probably not that realistic. It's different. You're waiting for Kelvin Banks and DJ Campbell because you feel really good about your chances there. I don't know that you necessarily hold a spot for a guy like Shanahan because they're in his top 5, but probably 5th. Kelvin
Banks was recruited to Oregon. Cam Williams
was committed to Oregon, but
he wasn't a top 5. He didn't have a top 5.
There was still constant communication behind the scenes, and Texas always felt pretty good, even after he committed to Oregon. They felt like they had a really good chance of flipping him, and obviously things fell into place with Mario Cristobal leaving. But even with him being committed to Oregon, Alex, I think Texas had a better chance of flipping him than they do landing an uncommitted TJ Shanahan.
Oh, that's fair. I'll listen to you on it. I would just say that you would think that if they were to take a guy like Strickland, it wouldn't preclude them from taking another, because he feels a little bit more like a project and a little bit more like a projection.
Well, the thing is that I was going to ask you, Catch, does that mean, and I'm just curious if from like the LSR perspective or even, Jason DeVito's perspective, are there just not a lot of offensive linemen who have not committed left, or are they just kind of taking what's left at this moment, or are there bigger fish on the board, in your opinion?
Not really for Texas, Anwar. I'm pulling up my recruiting board. You got TJ Shanahan, you got Zalance Hurd is a phenomenal player out of Louisiana. Likes Texas a lot, but he's probably going to wind up at LSU. Miles McVay is a lineman that he'll actually be in for the pool party next weekend, but probably going to Oregon or Alabama. Texas is playing from behind there. So, they've got their 4 guys committed, and they've got feelers and some hooks into some other guys, but nobody, elite that Texas, I think, has a strong chance of landing. So, listen, Peyton Kirkland's a Rivals 250 guy. I mean, he's not a slouch, and he's got the size like that. I think Ketch mentioned that Kyle Flood covets. Is he 6'7", right? 6'7", 330, I believe. 6'7", 325. So,
in the database, but
yeah. Flood has been on him for a long time. Like, people in the chat have said, I'm going to trust Kyle Flood's evaluations. If there's one coach on this Texas staff that I probably would never question, it's probably Kyle Flood. So if Flood likes him and thinks he can turn him into something, I mean, who am I to argue, man? So you bring in as many big bodies as you can and throw a lot of numbers at the wall and see who comes out on top.
Well, what's interesting, and Anwar, I feel like moving forward, if there's a transfer in the portal, if there's a prospect people want to ask questions about, we know what the number one trait for a Kyle Flood offensive lineman at this point is. He wants someone to be able to block out the sun. And that is one thing that this kid has in common with some of the players that Texas has been taking. He's tall, he's huge. These guys don't pan out at super high rates. And they're hard to find. However, if you sign enough of them, you only need 1 out of 3, 1 out of 4 to hit, and then you've got a mammoth NFL-sized tackle that you feel good about, and you don't really worry a whole lot about who doesn't hit. When I look at the Kirkland offer, it's kind of, for me, a double down on a Cam Williams. They're similar in size, but I see Alex shaking his head. He clearly doesn't view
Cam's 370, or he was, but
they're both big and tall. That's the comparison should stop there.
They're on the right side of the line. Like, there's some additional characteristics inside of that. I think that you're just going to see, Anwar, this is what Flood's going to do moving forward. So forget about where a kid's ranked. If he finds a kid who's 6'6" or taller and 325 plus, that is the beginning of the framework of what we know Kyle Flood likes.
The same way we know that if there's a receiver who's like 6'1" and 165 pounds but has like a 4.3 speed, then that's a Sarkisian guy, right?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. He wants fast wide receivers.
So is this similar to like Ruben Owens, where Texas was going after Ruben Owens, and then when they started getting hints that he'd probably be going elsewhere, then everyone was like, Cedric Baxter is so much better than Ruben Owens. Is there an equivalent as far as offensive line recruiting this year, or no?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, look at the lineman catch. Someone posted in the chat. Mike Torres said smallest lineman in this class is 6'4". I mean, you've got potentially a 6'7" lineman that's going to commit. Andre Kojo is a big dude, man. He's 6'6", 330. Connor Stroh, we all know, is huge, 6'7", 345. There's a picture with Kojo standing by Connor Stroh, and he doesn't look a lot smaller than Connor Stroh. So you got 6'7", 345, 6'6", 330. Trevor Goosby's 6'6", up to 282. I think he measured at 6'6" and a half whenever he visited Texas. That's barefoot. And then Jaden Chapman is the smallest at 6'4", 288. So you're right, man. I mean, Kyle Flood, the days of seeing Texas take these guys that are 6'3", 260 pounds, and you're trying to throw weight onto them, those days are gone. That's not Kyle Flood.
It really is the opposite of the McWhorter approach from back in the day. I mean, he wanted an athlete. He wanted guys that moved well, feeling like they could pack weight on them. And, sometimes those guys hit. It's funny. I don't know. Flood's such an – Alex, either you or I have got to do a deep dig on him and his Rutgers days, because his sample size at Alabama is not large enough to draw a lot of conclusions from. He wasn't there a long time. And the guys that he recruited, he didn't see out. So most of the guys that he worked with were guys that were recruited previously. So it doesn't automatically mean he was even coaching with the type of guys he wants. When people say, and I tend to agree, this isn't an anti-Kyle Flood remark. I just am curious at like what success he's had with these types of guys, because this is the way of the future for Texas. They are going to be big, if nothing else.
And they kind of look, that kind of transformation needs to happen if you're playing in the SEC, right? You can't have these guys, like you said, these Mac McWhorter converted F tight ends who are, you're going to be, they have really good feet, and you're just expecting them to put on all the good weight and everything. Like you go to the SEC and you do that, you feel like you're going to have to cater your whole offense, just do something different, something wild. I mean, if you want to line up and go toe to toe with the defensive linemen that are on every major program in that conference, you got to have some size to be able to move them if you're going to want to do what your offense is capable of doing. So, yeah, I mean, you can see why. Kyle Flood likes big guys. Texas is moving to the SEC. When? Who knows? But might as well get a head start on the type of bodies you're going to need to be able to be competitive in that conference.
Jason, looking at the pool party, Kyle Flood wants guys that when they get in the pool, half the water in the swimming pool. They get out and you have to add water because half the water is no longer in. It is. I'll just hand it back to you from a recruiting standpoint, because this time next week we will be talking more about not just these kind of pair of guys, but the recruiting process picks up in earnest again. There's a part of me that thinks they don't even think they'll sign this kid in December or February, but that it isn't a bad headline right before Baxter makes his decision on the 10th, right before a few of these guys are just looking for nudges. And like you said, we're talking about a guy who's a Rivals 250 guy, seems to have quite the personality. I guess the thing I was thinking about is how active – when that kid did his thing, Jonte Cook, you sent me the screenshot of that, where like Jonte Cook was already hyping that kid's commitment up before any of this really started to get out. Mm-hmm. These Texas commitments, maybe more than any class I've seen, are really involved with what's happening right now. I wonder how much of that even has to do with Kirkland. And as we get ready to go into Texas having a big event next week, talk that Arch Manning will be returning to campus to potentially aid those efforts. This is an all hands on deck type of recruiting class. And I think it's one of the big reasons why they've got such momentum right now, is that these guys are all kind of jumping on board and helping with the peer pressure and the recruiting. And it's been quite a little interesting and powerful process to watch unfold.
You got some pretty active recruiters. I mean, Arch and Jonte, probably 1 and 2. I talked to Connor Stroh over the weekend, and he's actively recruiting guys like Anthony Hill. And Jonte's not great at keeping secrets. He keeps he's
the worst.
Yeah, hey, Jalen Hale's coming to Texas. Peyton Kirkland coming to Texas. Malik Muhammad's a Longhorn. Book it. So far he's nailed one. We'll see if the other two come to fruition. But you've got to. You always have players recruiting, on every year, right? You have certain guys who are your big recruiters. But when it's Arch Manning doing it, and even Jonte Cook, Jonte's a guy that's known nationally. He's an elite player, but he's also just got that kind of personality that people know of him, and he's going to make sure you know of him. So, when Arch Manning's hitting you up and Jonte Cook is hitting you up, I mean, these other recruits are going to take notice, and it is carrying a lot of weight. And we've kind of started to compile our pool party list for next weekend. And there'll be some uncommitted guys here, of course. There'll be a lot of 2024 guys that aren't committed, of course, but a lot of those Texas commitments will be in town. You mentioned Arch Manning. He'll be there. So a lot of those committed guys will be in town next weekend to aid those recruiting efforts.
Is the next big thing just surviving that A&M weekend? It's, I think what's interesting is, so if you got a guy like Toviano, right, who's top 5 player in the state of Texas, Texas now has 19 commitments who are knocking down his door. And A&M has a smaller class. Maybe it has no impact at all, but I do wonder for a few of these guys like Anthony Hill, how big of a factor the perception of momentum in recruiting is right now. Because A&M is probably telling them, look, by the end of the year, I think you can point to last year's class. We're going to have a badass nationally elite recruiting class, but it's not something that he can tangibly touch and feel and talk to players who are definitely going to be Aggies. But next weekend still feels big, even if some of those visits aren't unofficial or official visits. Getting to the finish line with a few of these players, it feels like A&M could be close to striking back. And then maybe at that point, Jason, we will really start to find out who's controlling the top end of the state right now.
Yeah, I mean, momentum is a fickle thing in recruiting. I mean, Texas has it now. Texas had it with guys like Anthony Hill after that official visit weekend in June. A&M's going to get their chance to chip away this weekend. And you're going to, I mean, listen, you know what's going to happen. We're going to come out of this weekend hearing positive A&M buzz with Anthony Hill, DJ Hicks, if he shows up there. I know he's going to Oklahoma. I think he's going to A&M as well. So, yeah, I mean, you got to kind of weather that storm, but that's what recruiting is. But the momentum Texas has right now is absolutely helping with a guy like Javian Toviano. He said as much. He said the Arch Manning thing is real, and it's affecting his impression of Texas and elevating Texas in his eyes. So, you got to withstand this coming week, or I guess next weekend when A&M has their big visit weekend, and Oklahoma's doing the same. But Texas is going to have its guys on campus too. So, that pendulum's going to swing back and forth a little bit. But I think if you're Texas right now with certainly a guy like Anthony Hill, you still like your position. Like you said, you just got to weather that storm next weekend and maintain that position.
Anwar, one of the breaking news bits today, and I bring this up, I know that you and I have talked about this on shows in the past. I think we may have even on the Modcast. Kirby Smart today, though, signing a 10-year, $112 million deal. Those numbers may, be slight. It sounds like he's signing a 10-year extension, 10 plus a year. When we look at Sarkisian and recruiting, and he still has 5 seasons left on his deal, so I don't feel like Texas is in that big of a hurry to do an extension. But, it is one of those things that people will talk about. We will start to look at his contract. Your thoughts on the way Texas handles Sark over the course of the next few years, knowing that he's still so early in his deal?
I think they still got to take the wait and see approach, Catch. I definitely, even though there's guys who are heavily invested in his success, like a Chris Del Conte or L Type, they still can't, overreact. They've got to let this building process kind of go and continue before they make any kind of decisions. Because look, I mean, they will be going into the big boy division, the SEC, where we have to have a conversation and realistically about what defines success in the SEC for the University of Texas. We know what the expectations are as far as the Big 12 is concerned. It's, getting to the championship game or bust. But we understand to go into the SEC. I mean, that just to say like that should be the expectation every year. That's like I said, we may have to redefine what success is in that conference, especially as it becomes like a big mega conference. So, I think what we've seen over the last couple of years, Catch, is that we've seen schools really money whipping the best guys out there and bringing them aboard. So, I don't think Texas has to make any moves anytime soon. I think they let this thing play out. Hope that he continues to build in the way that they want him to build, and hope that he build. But I don't think Texas should overreact to anything. I think, the Tom Herman thing should be the cautionary tale getting to the Sugar Bowl and then rewarding him with an extension and then having to eat that extension as Tom Herman sits, on his couch somewhere eating, bonbons and chilling out for, as he collects checks from Texas. I think you just got to let it play out. But, see what he does, the last couple of years here, and then see what he does in the SEC. And then I think you make a judgment call, because at that point he would have been given 4 years or so to build for the SEC. You would, so by about 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024. So 4 years to get to that point. And so, we have to wait and see. And Mark, just before you go into the Sark is not Herman on so many levels. Let's remind you, you're coming off a 5-win season. So that, relax before you go into that coach wasn't shit. Let's Sark build before you start saying the other guy wasn't good enough or whatever the case may be.
I don't get the comments I'm reading that people are saying long-term commitment is what's needed. Kirby Smart won a national championship. He's been there a while. I mean, Sark is 5-7 1 year in. There's no way you can think about extending him.
He's got 5 years on his deal.
Yeah, man.
Correct.
Hey, if he wins the conference this year, fine. Maybe you add on a year or something. But I mean, to put him and Kirby Smart even in the same breath is just remarkable to me.
Alex, I think that Anwar brings up a good point. When Texas gets into the SEC, how do we start? Even when Texas is bad in the Big 12, it's win 10-plus games, go to a major bowl game, win the Big 12. Like, that's how you define good seasons, great seasons, whatever. When Texas gets into the SEC, there will need to be a recalibration of sorts for what a successful season is, because this year is a perfect example. Either Georgia or Alabama is not going to win the SEC this year, and yet they may play in the playoff, and yet they may be undefeated going to a conference championship game. I mean, it isn't – it's a really high bar to reach if you're defining success by getting into an SEC championship game or winning it. When we get to 2024, what do you think a new, bar for excellence starts to look like?
There is no new bar. It's like, welcome to Texas, dude. It's like you're making, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The fans want to go to the SEC, and the fans want to go win in the SEC, and they want to be the best of the best of the best. Texas has the most money of anybody else. Texas has the largest endowment fund of anybody else. Texas has the most resources of anybody else to get this done at any level that it wants to. It's got the brand recognition. It's got Texas has everything going for it. And the fans that graduated from that school, or have been fans of that school, understand that. They understand that what's been put on the plate for the last decade has been absolute trash. There's been coach after coach after coach that's tried to turn it around. It's Steve Sarkisian's job to turn it around. It's Steve Sarkisian's job to take this thing back. He's not. What is he getting paid every year? Is it $6 million?
Sark is 5.6,
5.7. Okay, so he's getting paid $6 million a year. It's like you don't get paid $6 million a year to deal with reasonable expectations from people. It's like they're going to be unreasonable expectations. It's just what it is.
Alex, if I put the Cowboys in a division with the Rams, Cardinals, and 49ers,
same expectations.
You can't, listen, it's different when you're playing against the Giants, and then you got to go against those killers like every single thing. Like, I get it, but you're talking about going against like the heavyweight champions of the world. And you're saying
which changes from year to year, Anwar. I mean, we talked about 3 years ago about how the NFC East was going to be one of the toughest divisions in all of football to compete in. This year, they're not. You talk about the NFC West, the AFC West. I get this stuff changes, man. There's parity in college football, just like there is in the NFL. There's probably less in the college football now, and there will be less moving forward just because of NIL, money, the schools, all the powers consolidating, et cetera, et cetera. But within these conferences, there will be parity, the same way that there's going to be parity inside the divisions in the NFL. It's like the expectation at Texas is, look, we're paying you all the money in the damn world. We'll pay for all your recruits. We'll do whatever you need to do that we could do legally now. you're going to have the backing of not only all the alumni, the biggest alumni base that there is for a public university outside of maybe the University of Michigan, the largest endowment of any institution, the full faith and credit of every public and political institution, all the way up to the damn governor of the state. And what you're going to do is you're going to win football games. And if you don't win football games, fans are going to be disappointed. It's like, they're not going to say like, yeah, all of a sudden now that we're in the SEC, 7 wins is fine. Do you know what Texas fans call that? They call that Aggie logic.
It's true.
But what if you're 9-3 in the SEC?
But Alex, I get what you're saying, but you're talking about doing something that Texas hasn't done in the Big 12. Now you're talking about applying those same set of standards against teams that we're talking about. To Ketch's point, for the most part, Georgia and Alabama will be in every CFP. Just book it. They're done. I mean,
nobody said Texas fans are reasonable, man. But I mean,
that's what I'm saying. Like, that's what I'm saying. You're projecting some air of reasonability that I'm telling you, man. I've lived in Central Texas my whole life. It doesn't exist.
It's a fair point, Anwar. You're right, but they're right too. Like, you're using logic and reason in a world where logic and reason.
So in year one, if Texas isn't in the SEC championship game, that's viewed as a disappointing season?
Maybe 4 years into Sarkisian's era,
year
Texas
one,
fans will feel that way.
2024, Texas rolls in the SEC, and the expectation should be, listen, man, if you don't get to the SEC championship game, this season's a failure.
Well, didn't we both last night pick Texas to win the Big 12 next year in 2023?
Yes.
So if they're conference champions in 2023, yeah, Texas fans first year into the SEC will be expecting them to compete for a conference championship.
I need a new beat if this is.
Plus, Arch will be the quarterback. Oh, my God. Expectations are going to be bananas in 2024 when Arch Manning is starting his games. Trust me, I lived the Chris Sims experience. It'll be bananas. The team will be 10-2, and they'll be complaining that Manning isn't doing well enough. Let's go to the Super Chat real quick, Thomas.
Great. I don't even understand.
Thomas mentions in the Super Chat, Jason, I'll just throw this to you because I personally don't know how to quantify it. How much of our recruiting success do you attribute to the impending move to the SEC? And then he throws on, if Jimbo doesn't do better than 8-4 again, what does that do? I'll just let you tackle the spirit of Thomas's two questions.
Yeah. The first question, how much do I attribute to the move to the SEC? That's certainly a part of it, Thomas. I don't think that's the biggest part, though. I mean, Ketch said it's hard to quantify, but I mean, if I'm saying, maybe 20% of it is due to that. I mean, that's something Texas is selling, and they're certainly selling it more and more now that there appears to be a somewhat of a firm target date. You can kind of see it on the horizon now, so the coaches can sell that a little more clearly. But it's a factor, but I don't think it's the biggest factor. I think it's more confidence in the coaches. It's confidence in the direction that people think Sark is getting this thing turned around, and it's the direction it's heading. I think it's the recruiting momentum they've built, starting with Arch Manning. So those are much bigger factors right now than the move to the SEC, but it is something that helps. It is something that, tips the scale in Texas's favor a little bit. Second question, if Jimbo doesn't do better than 8-4, again, what does that do? I think A&M has to, as Anwar really pointed out, 8-4 in the SEC is not terrible, guys, but that's not good enough. If they did it last year, they have got to keep making improvements in that record because they're recruiting at an elite. Hell, last year's class was an all-time elite class for Texas A&M. They've got to start getting returns on the field. Otherwise, that momentum will kind of be I don't want to say it'll come crashing down, but it'll be stagnant a little bit, and that does help Texas. So, A&M's they're doing exceptionally well in recruiting. There's no way to deny it. If you're a Texas fan, you put your head in the sand. A&M is recruiting. Last year, they recruited better than anybody in the country. But if they don't start putting together better success on the field, getting up there with the Alabamas and the Georgias, I think eventually and probably pretty soon, it's going to be tough for them to continue that kind of recruiting momentum.
Hey, Ketch, Danny Juarez asked the question, and I'm not trying to clown you, Danny, at all. Dustin hasn't worked here in a little while.
God!
I just want to put that out there. I'm not trying to clown you, my man.
Where's Dustin McCoy?
Dustin hasn't worked here in a while.
We're like officially Dustin finished out last June, I think. Like he finished the College World Series, and then I think there was like a week left on his deal. His last column for Orange Bloods was a preview of the 2021 Major League Draft.
he's on like episode like 8. I just noticed like he's on episode 85 of his new podcast that he started.
I like that Anwar said, Danny, I'm not trying to clown on you, but we are kind of clowning on Danny. No. Shout out to Mark, by the way, Mark Rome, who's just given us a shout out in the super chat. Appreciate all that you do for the fanatical fans. Thank you, Mark. That's nice of you to say. Trust me, we don't hear the nice things as much as we hear the negative things. So a little pat on the back is like jet fuel for us. It does make us feel good to hear you guys happy, satisfied, and all those things.
My wife Ketch sometimes tells me, because you must love your job because like people tell you how great you are all the time. Like, no, you don't know how our job works. Like, not really.
That's it. She nailed it. It's because everybody's super positive all the time. And don't show her the video from a couple of days ago where I told one of our chat members to F off, F you, because he was just being kind of a turd at the time. Alex, just to finish off the A&M discussion for a little bit, I think what's really interesting is how different A&M under Fisher versus Texas under Sark, the prototype, because if you look at A&M right now, like last year they signed a bazillion 5-star defensive linemen and linebackers and little bit of everything. And I know that they get Connor Weigman as their quarterback prospect, but they've mostly been building with beef and size and kind of an NFL traditional way of looking at building a roster. Whereas if you look at Texas, you know, what stood out about Muhammad was that other than Terrence Brooks, all of the elite signings that Texas has made up until now have been skill guys for the most part on offense, quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, obviously offensive linemen from a year ago. I wonder which one gets there fastest, because if you look at A&M's roster, the top 5 teams in college football in terms of number of the elite super blue chip prospects, you've got Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Texas A&M, and Clemson. And those 5 teams, 4 of them feel like they belong together. 1 doesn't, but they better soon, or not that they're going to do anything with Fisher. The guy's got like 19 years left on his contract. He's there, but storylines in college football have a way of just taking off. You know, once a reputation builds, it's hard to deny. It does feel like this is a big year for A&M to start to compete at a nationally elite level, given what their roster says they should probably be doing.
Yeah, I think that, yes. And I think that's what Aggie fans expect. I also think that they're pretty dug in on Jimbo. You know, it felt like there was a little time for a minute there right at the very beginning where they kind of maybe a little bit panicked. Do you remember that at all? At the very beginning, they're saying like, golly, this is going to be a 10-year deal after some initial
Yes.
I think that now, you know, they've sort of seen what it's like to have a little bit of success. They've had the recruiting success. I mean, they were kicking Texas asses in recruiting, you know, for a good few years there, and that was they got a taste of something that they really like with him. I think they're behind Jimbo. Now, I do think when the worm will start to really turn is if Texas, you know, goes to the SEC and Texas is consistently beating Texas A&M. I mean, that'll be it. Look, man, if Texas goes to the SEC and Texas A&M is consistently beating Texas fans are going to want that coach fired. You know, it's just like that's the way it goes. It's It's like, what do they say, in these rivalry games? What do they say? Who was it? Peter Gardere that won all his games versus OU, stuff like that. He never has to buy a beer in Austin ever again. And who knows what he even did with the rest of his seasons I guess Ketch would know what he did with the rest of his seasons. But the fact of the matter is, if you win these big rivalry games, man, that stuff buys you a lot of time. I think with Jimbo Fisher, if he doesn't get to the top of the mountain before Texas gets there, and all of a sudden Texas is back kicking Texas A&M's ass on the football field, that's the time whenever the heat comes right back on him.
Anwar, your thoughts on A&M just in general?
They're paying him a lot of money. So, the problem is when you're paying a guy that kind of money, A&M basically went all chips in on getting a guy that they believed could help them get to maybe, not only the conference championship game, but get to a natty. That's the expectation that they put, on that. When you hire a guy like Jimbo, when you pay him, when they threw that money at him, it was they went all chips in. So he's Jason's talked about, he's recruiting well. Even though they do play in a tough conference, they've let everyone know that's what they want to do. And when you have a guy like Saban, in the off season saying that they bought all their players and bought their recruiting class and throwing that jab at them and then trying to clean it up a little bit later, that becomes so I think for A&M, the expectation really becomes like they've got to really make that mark, kind of have to take a step up. And, even though Alabama's going to have a good team, like they've got to be the team that's competing against Ole Miss, Bama, over the next couple of years in order to really be in a conference championship game.
Jay, the activist, jumps into the super chat saying Texas has an opening after Saban retires. Besides Kirby, who are you really sold on as a head coach in the SEC? Maybe the Arkansas coach. Sark has a lot to prove. I don't really disagree with any of that. I mean, there will be an opening when Saban retires. Alex, what do you think? As an Alabama job, Saban leaves. They're looking for a new head coach. The roster's so loaded that it has to be tantalizing if you are a coach on the outside looking in to be able to take that roster. You'll get paid a lot of money, but my God, the expectations, the thing that you will be signing up for, taking over Saban's program, good luck.
Yeah. And to talk about a fan base that's going to have expectations. I mean, Jesus. That's a job that I wouldn't want to take. It's a job that I wouldn't want to take. I don't know who would want to take.
I'll tell you the guy who takes it.
Who?
Dabo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a Dabo job. He used to coach at Bama, so he's definitely familiar with that fan base. The ACC, come on. I mean, we don't know what that conference looks like at some point, and this guy's proven that he can win. I think Dabo, to me, ends up being like the natural guy that goes in there and probably can handle all of that.
How many games did Lane Kiffin win last year?
10, I believe.
Did he get? So he got a 10 wins. You just asked about who
in year 2 though, Alex. I think he was like 5-5 in the first year, if I'm correct.
I just see I think the question was like, who you really sold at as a head coach in the SEC? I guess I'm probably not sold on Kiffin yet. Are you guys sold on Sam Pittman? I really like him.
He's a nationally elite coach, but he's really good.
Yeah, I'm trying to think really who. I mean, I guess you probably haven't seen sold on Brian Kelly. I mean, we know Kelly's a good coach.
Kelly's an elite college football coach.
He's a good old Southern boy, Ketch. I mean, that's the one thing you got to know about Kelly. He's a good old Southern boy from Louisiana.
He ain't doing that stuff quite as much now. He's doing this stuff where he dances around like he's at a rave at these photo shoots with the recruits, man. It's all pretty it's all cockamamie, man. So it's wild.
Alex, they tried to get him at SEC Media Days. His very first question was, what's your favorite thing to eat basically in the South? And can you say it in your best Southern accent? And he didn't take the bait. He didn't. Yeah. I desperately wanted to hear him do it, but he didn't do it.
Try to throw some Cajun touch on like an etouffee or something like that.
Exactly. Just refused to do it. And he wised up. Like, come on. You've won a lot of football games. You don't need to do that. Jason, I don't know. Like, it's the thing about the SEC is it is very top heavy. I mean, as a conference, it gets to walk around, boat up, and Texas fans, I don't think, can wait to be able to claim the SEC also for the exact same reasons. But it is for the last decade, it's been a very heavy Alabama, LSU, and now Georgia conference. And those three schools do a lot of the heavy lifting, and the other schools get to claim it.
Yeah, I was just kind of rereading that question. I mean, there really isn't anybody I'm sold on. I guess Brian Kelly would be my answer. I mean, Pittman's a good coach. I agree, but I mean,
What about Stoops? What about Stoops' brother at Kentucky? Is that Mike Stoops or is that Mark Stoops?
Yeah, good coach, but is he elite? I mean, hell, Mike Leach, good coach, but is he, is he elite? I don't know. So, you mentioned Kiffin, all good coaches, but I think it's a two-headed monster in the SEC, and then it's a huge drop-off after that. I mean, honestly, Texas fans will hate to hear this, and I'll probably shout it down, but you probably have to put Jimbo third. He's at least got a national championship, and he's recruiting exceptionally well. He's got to do better on the field for A&M, but he's at least got some skins on the wall.
Anwar segueing into the Jimbo talk again. I guess he's at SEC. It's Jimbo Day at SEC Media Day.
Yeah.
And you just sent a note in Slack from comments that he's made at SEC Media Day, which suggests that Texas, LSU, and Mississippi would be the three teams that A&M would play annually if the SEC decides to go to three permanent opponents. Makes me think that A&M, Arkansas, and Oklahoma would be Texas's in a world where they did that.
Yeah, the one thing that Sankey mentioned during Big 12 media days, and then of course a little bit of my conversation, is the importance of regional rivalries and what that really means to college football. So he talked about he referenced the Texas Arkansas game and how that was, and he was there because I saw him there at that game. And the importance of those regional rivalries. They're not going to add in Texas and then not have regional rivals and bring back some of the old rivals that they once had. It doesn't make any sense. And you've heard, even Leach talking about getting rid of the two Alabama teams from, their conference. And then maybe he has Texas and Oklahoma, coming in. So I would suspect that no matter what Sankey tried to say, we're going to trend towards having a little bit more of the regional rivalry thing.
By the way, the exact quote from Fisher was, "You want Texas because of that rivalry. LSU is a great rivalry. Arkansas goes into that. Probably LSU and Texas for sure. The third team is Mississippi State." He's just, he's talking about what he wants. And then, it's like, oh, then there's
Vanderbilt. Throw Vanderbilt in there.
So it's three schools, three total?
There would be three rivalry games that you would play every year.
So, in that pod, must those members play the rivalry games against the same pod of four total teams?
No, doesn't sound
okay,
like it.
So Texas can have A&M, Arkansas, and OU, but A&M could have LSU, Arkansas, and Texas or something.
In this instance, it sounds like, Alex, that Fisher is saying they wouldn't have Arkansas as part of their rivalry, which is probably a shame because the A&M Arkansas games turned into a really interesting game. Don't they play that in Dallas, and they've done some neutral field stuff for that? He's saying that their third school would be Mississippi State, according to Jimbo Fisher today, which Mississippi State wouldn't be part of Texas's. That just sounds like they got to find a date for Mississippi State.
Mm-hmm.
And poor Texas A&M might have to assume, taking that one for the team. Boy, an annual schedule that has Oklahoma, Arkansas, and and A&M on it. I've seen that before. It's been 30 years, but those are fun college football seasons.
A lot of fun,
all
dude.
three of those are on the schedule.
It's a lot of fun, man. It's a lot of fun. And like I always talk about, it's not just only that. It's just why I was so excited about Texas moving to the SEC. We talked about it. But like, I can't wait to, not that I go down to 36th Street anymore or anything like that, but I can't wait to see what it's like down there on, just down there in the entertainment district in Austin when these new fans, when these fans come in for like big SEC football games, every other weekend. It's not just those rivalry games; it's the games that are going to be around. It's going to be awesome whenever Texas one random year goes to the Swamp or goes to Rocky Top or stuff like this. It's going to be those awesome rivalry games intermixed with other really kind of cool and unique situations that'll make for good home games and also good travel opportunities for fans.
Yeah, Alex, imagine a lot of these SEC fans who've had to travel. Think of all the destination spots in the SEC, and they finally get Austin on the schedule.
Oh, God, yeah, man.
They don't have to go to Starkville or Gainesville or some of these Oxford, but they actually get to go to Austin. Like that's when you show up on a Thursday or and really start enjoying your life.
Yeah, man, it'd be good for the city for sure. And I think it's good for the action, good for the entertainment, good for us because there'll be plenty of stuff to write and talk about.
Jason, last thing before we go into parting shots, so a little bit of warning for everybody to get those ready. It does remind me of a point that you made in the last couple of Modcasts. I can't remember, the weeks all blend together, but when we start talking about how Texas is evaluated, really and truly moving forward, it will be how did they do against those teams on their schedule? Because we've lived in such an OU-centric world for such a long time that, it's been a decade since you kind of count A&M as, well, did you beat A&M? Because that's a big deal. Did you beat Oklahoma? Because that's a big deal. And then you directly compare yourself to your rivals in part to determine how well your season was. I think that is the big answer to the question that we were having earlier. It's circling back to Texas fans are going to compare themselves to OU and to A&M. And I think as Arkansas gets back into the yearly rotation, it won't take long before that's realized as a really important rival again.
Yeah, not just on the field. You've got to win those games on the field, but you're also going to be measured in recruiting against those programs. I mean, people ask about, I hear this question a lot, and is 8-4 good enough for Texas this year to keep this recruiting momentum? Is 7-5 good enough? 9-3? I mean, we all know 10-2 and 11-1 is good enough, but is 8-4 good enough for Texas this year to continue to build recruiting momentum? Probably, but if Jimbo Fisher takes A&M to the SEC title game or even wins the conference, and 8-4 is probably not good enough. So you're always going to be measured against, is 8-4 good enough if Oklahoma and Brent Venables in his first year wins the Big 12? No, 8-4 is not good enough in that scenario. So there's different variables. 8-4 could certainly be good enough, but you're always going to be measured against what's happening in College Station, what's happening in Norman, some degree what's happening in Fayetteville, as you said, Ketch, both on the field and in recruiting.
All right, fellas, we've been going for about an hour now. Let's get ready to jump into parting shots. Real quick, Jesse with a super chat question. A&M's real rivalries are Texas, LSU, Oklahoma, Bama, and Arkansas. Where do they get Mississippi State from? Tell them to stop cherry picking. I think that's what that is. They'll be back to being average.
I'm surprised Jimbo didn't say, give me Missouri, Vanderbilt. It's like
well, what he did say is that he prefers Arkansas.
Eh.
And, the big winner in this is Arkansas. For the last 25 years, people have been questioning their move to the SEC and if it worked out for them. Because when they left the Southwest Conference, they were, along with A&M, the two big dogs in the conference. And then they never really struck fire in the SEC. And now they get to be in the SEC, and they're going to get back, I think, their natural rivalries that they've had. I mean, I think even last week or this week, earlier in the week, the SEC commissioner was talking about an Arkansas-Oklahoma game and how, or no, it was a Missouri-Oklahoma game. God, I wonder what Oklahoma ends up getting in its 3 rivalries. But I got to believe Arkansas getting back Texas really allows them to say that Texas, the state of Texas, is a home base for them in recruiting. I think they'll be big winners in all of this. Thank you to Jesse for the final super chat question of the day. We'll go into parting shots. Anybody want to go first?
I might go.
Oh, okay.
No, go ahead, Alex. You got.
I was just gonna say I don't have much to want. I'm just gonna say I saw on Twitter. I don't know. Do you guys have thoughts on Kyler Murray now being the second highest paid quarterback in the NFL on a year by year basis? Just signed a new contract. What else were they going to do? 250, basically 235 million with 160 guaranteed.
How much is guaranteed?
160. Second highest paid QB on average at 46.1 million per year. Makes me just think, golly. Somebody pointed out on Twitter, it's interesting. It's like after Lamar does his deal, now Josh Allen's going to get bumped out of the top 5. It's like these guys, it's like, man, this is just, these teams are killing each other with these deals they're giving. I can't believe that Deshaun Watson is the number 3, and, you know, who knows if he'll even play this year. And then it also makes me think what's going to happen with Russell Wilson now that he's older. Is he going to want some kind of $250 million in 5 more years? Like, these
Alex, isn't the big thing here is they couldn't let the Baker Mayfield situation repeat itself. I mean, you can't have a number 1 quarterback not get extended after his rookie deal. Because if you do, I mean, that just is such a disaster for Cleveland. I know they've got Watson now, and who knows what the hell that means, but to draft Baker Mayfield so high and then to basically pay him to go to Carolina, it feels like the Cardinals just, it's a lot of money, but what was their other option?
I don't know. I guess pay a short quarterback that can't see over the offensive line a lot of money. That's what they're going to do. It's what Cleveland didn't want to do. I don't know. It's like, it's a lot of money, man. I hope, and look, Kyler's a great player. I hope he can manage not to stay hurt just for the Cardinals' sake. And, yeah, like you said, at least they're not in the Baker kind of situation. And here's the thing: Steve Keim, that general manager, his job should have been lost years ago. At this point in time, his job is tied to Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury and what those two could do together. So, interesting, man, really interesting. And I guess congrats to your boy, Ketchum's boy, Kyler Murray, who once told Ketch to keep his name out of his mouth.
Am I a bad person for wishing bad things to Kyler, even now?
Probably.
The guy's got $100+ million, so it's not like I'm voodoo jinxing him, but I generally kind of like it when 5 dudes, defensive linemen, hit him at once, and he's really slow getting up off the turf. Like, I enjoy that.
Okay, well, that's good.
I think that makes me a bad human being, doesn't it? By definition.
I think everybody has their own foibles. Yeah,
a little bit. I think it's up for a conversation.
Yeah.
I believe.
Exactly. I'm not going to argue with you.
I won't absolve him that quickly.
I'm not like Mother Teresa. We can definitely say that. Anwar, you've got a parting shot. What you got?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I feel the same about Baker Mayfield. So maybe there are some bad human beings. We both are. Hey, Ketchum, I just want to say is just, being back from, SEC media days and having a chance to reflect, and I have some things in the war room. I just gotta say, I'm just left overall really impressed by the conference, just the leadership that Sankey provides, that conference, and the vision that I think this conference has, probably more so than any other conference that I've seen. So it starts from the top and kind of trickles its way down. Ketchum, and I talked about what I always noticed throughout the week I was there, or a few days I was there, was just the pride that all these coaches have just being in the SEC. You don't hear people talking about Big 12 pride and how we're big and bad or anything like that, but from every coach, it kind of beats their chest about what the SEC is and is about. And, and again, when I start thinking about vision, and Alex, you appreciate this, they typically have had the SEC media days in Alabama for years. They moved it to Atlanta this year. But next year, Alex, they're going to have it in Nashville. And you remember when the NFL draft was in Nashville and all the outdoors things that they had for the fan experience? Next year, that's the goal for the SEC, is to have something that's similar to what the NFL draft did and have a fan experience where they can have a bunch of people from different places kind of descend upon Nashville, have an outdoor area. Like, that's kind of their plan and that vision. And so my other conferences are just trying to find a facility and just say, come on, let's just go ahead and do this Big 12 Media Day thing or whatever, ACC, Pac-12, whatever. SEC is like, let's make it even bigger and better, and let's mimic the NFL. They're just so smart in what they do, and I think Texas fans are really going to appreciate being in this conference long term.
That whole Nashville thing, man, that, like, I got to experience that not only like just right down there, like live on Broadway, not only as like a broadcaster when I was doing my radio show where like all these people behind you and stuff, but also just after you get done, just as a fan walking around, going into bars. You can walk on the street with drinks, and you see, look over here, you see like Todd McShay is, up on, he's doing his stuff, and players are getting called across the stage, and it's just like, all it is just a big meeting, right, where people pick players, and it's the same, basically the same thing as an SEC. So it's basically the same thing as an SEC Media Days. You just bring all the fans around, they're all wearing their jerseys, they talk crap to one another, they have a bunch of fun, you get in the bars, you talk about what the coaches say. Like, I think that sounds amazing. Like that actually is super duper cool, man. It's a great idea. Of course, Big 12 would never think of something.
If it's in Nashville next year, I'll go. I love Nashville. We used to go there every year for the Rivals convention, and it's like home away from home. Like, I've got friends in Nashville. I love a Nashville trip.
Come here. It'll be there next year. Plan it now.
I'm in. By the way,
I might go. That sounds awesome.
Jesse said in the chat that he likes, so when you mentioned you like it when something bad happens to Baker Mayfield. I've got Kyler Murray. Jesse says he does it for Brady. I wonder if everybody just has an NFL guy that they love to see abused and battered. Like, Ravens fans would have loved to have seen Big Ben, all those hard hits he took. Like, I just wonder if maybe there just aren't good human beings that like the NFL.
It was Phillip Rivers for all those Raiders fans, I think.
Jason, do you have one? Who's the guy that you'd like to see kind of take a beating?
I don't really. I'm a Steelers fan, so I thought Lamar Jackson, but I just love watching Lamar Jackson play. It would have been Baker if he was still with the Browns, but now I don't give a shit. Joe Burrow, I like. He's at Cincinnati, so I don't really have one. Maybe I'm just a better person than the rest of you.
What about Tom Brady?
I actually like Brady, man. I respect the hell out of him. So I don't really.
Jason's a better human being than most of us in this, and I just find that hard to believe. But
me too, actually. Yeah.
the data points are the data points. Jason, what do you got from a parting shot standpoint?
Again, kind of circle back to the beginning. I'm expecting a productive recruiting weekend for Texas. Good to be back from vacation. Vacation was great last week, but I found myself just kind of anxious to get back, and actually grounded my daughter while we're on vacation. So that's a whole other story. Golly. So never had to do that before. So
how do you ground someone on vacation? What does she have to
keep fired on your day off?
No. On where the grounding started when we got home. I should clarify. I said, when we get home, you're grounded for a week. So, it was still a good vacation.
She had to live it up for like a few days before she got home.
Yeah, then she's paying her dues now, though, man. I've got her doing chores, and she pressure washed the house for me the other day and mowed the lawn. So, maybe I'm not such a nice person after all, right? But just good to be back in the flow of things. It's amazing when you normally when I take vacation, you and I are similar, man. We're still on the boards and just kind of obsessive. This time we were just on the go, literally from the time we woke up till the time we went to bed. So I wasn't as active on the boards and just reading and paying attention as much as I normally do. But man, it's amazing how much you feel out of the loop when you're gone for a week and you come back. Just so much shit happens day to day on Orange Bloods. It's amazing how much you can miss in a 1 week span. But good to be back. Good to be back in the flow of things.
My final parting shot will be SEC related and Lane Kiffin related. I don't know if you guys have seen the video of Lane Kiffin finding out from his daughter at the mall how much money she spent at the mall. Any of you guys see that?
Yes, I've seen it. At Zara, I believe is the name of the place that she went to. Yeah.
So back in the day, Lane Kiffin was very hard to relate to, right? Because he's living in LA. He's got a beautiful LA wife. And then he becomes the youngest head coach in the NFL. And it's just hard to relate to Lane Kiffin. But the older he's gotten, the more relatable he is. And if you haven't seen the video of him finding out that his daughter spent $712 at the mall, he checks his blood pressure and has to calm himself down, and you can literally see the exasperation in his face as she tells him the number. And it sounds like one of his other daughters, it sounded like the daughter that he asked the question to claimed she didn't know. And then one of his other daughters was standing by and was like, no, it was $712, the way good siblings tend to do. Never before I felt like I was watching Lane Kiffin respond to my wife. Never before have I felt so close to Lane Kiffin or to a coach than to have seen his reaction to some ridiculous amount of money that was spent at the mall just because. So I'm not saying I'm riding and dying with Lane Kiffin right now. I'm just saying I personally feel more connected to Lane Kiffin today than maybe any coach I have in a long time. Oof.
He actually has become a little bit more relatable, and in the war room, he when I asked him about Sarkisian, he said that they're boys and they're friends, but he joked, Kiffin, when he left, Sark took over the program at the very tail end of the season, and he said his joke with Sark is that when he was coaching that year, they were undefeated. He coached and he was 1-1 in the same year. So it's just little jokes, but he started laughing, and I was like, oh, this, and the media members were laughing. I'm like, wow, this guy is actually relatable. He seems to have humbled himself and changed throughout the years.
Well, he's had some humbling moments. Maybe you just have to be humbled a few times to be a little bit humble. Hey, everybody, thanks for watching. I mean, it's been a great Modcast. I didn't really even know what the hell we were going to talk about for an hour. And then by the end of it, I wanted to talk more about Jason having his daughter power wash the house. So it ended up being another one of our Modcasts where we start isn't always where we finish. And that is part of the beauty of it all. By the way, just got a shout out. Thanks from Thailand. Maybe one of the only places on earth where people are sweating more than they are here in Texas at the moment. I've got a friend in Thailand at this exact moment, and it's humid, as you would expect. But for myself, Jason, Suchomel, Anwar, and Alex, thanks for watching the Modcast. Tell your friends about it. Like it. Subscribe to it. Get notifications.